Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Going to Bat with Team Irie. This is episode number 23. If you've missed some of the previous episodes, you can scroll down on the foundation page here and watch those. Or if you're wanting to see the episodes coming up, just stay tuned here on the foundation page, and we usually post them the day before. Also, if you want to see the public events that we do, like the Diamond Dinner and different things we do out in public for high school kids and stuff, just go to our website, which is dif35.org. If you want to donate, you can donate there for spinal cord injury research, which we raise money for, and also baseball and softball high school scholarships that we give away for seniors that write essays on spinal cord injury awareness and prevention. So just look us up. Thanks, Bronson, for coming tonight. I really appreciate you being on here. How you been?
Good. I've been doing what everybody else was doing, just kind of hiding away from people and getting an opportunity to play a lot more golf than I was before it, which has been nice to have something to kind of get outside and just grind a little bit. But other than that, playing a little music in the basement, trying to get a little workout in, and putting on a mask and going to the grocery store. It's basically the top four things.
Yep, that sounds about right with the rest of us too. So, we'll start out with the questions. Kind of like to find out, where you started from, like your journey up to the major leagues, your minor league career and stuff, going up to the major leagues. Was it a pretty easy path, or did you have any struggles?
Well, it's tough to make all those steps. A lot of people don't realize that in baseball, if you go from the rookie league all the way to the major leagues, you've got basically like 7 or 8 levels. So, to make it all the way from kindergarten to 7th grade is tough without having some sort of struggles. And so I breezed through. I wouldn't say breezed through, but I was consistently a winner and had really good quality numbers almost at every single level. But then when I got to the big leagues, I struggled a bit, got sent back down. And so there was these 3 years of bouncing up and down, trying to establish yourself in the major leagues. And that took, that took parts of 7 seasons, really. I mean, I won 84 games in the minor leagues. I was 84 and like 45 or something. I was like 40 games over 500 with a mid-3 ERA. I mean, I had really, really solid numbers by anybody's standard. And even then, it took me a long time to get to the big leagues because it's just hard to play at the highest level right out of the gate, be comfortable in your own skin, and have people trust in what you have done at the lower levels. And so it took a little time really to get established at the major league level.
What was it like when you got the call to the majors?
Yeah, that was a great day. It was we were in Colorado Springs, and my manager at the time, I was playing for the Nashville Sounds, which was AAA for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I was drafted by the Pirates in '95, and I had ascended the whole organization. And that day I showed up to the park. I was supposed to pitch against the Colorado AAA team there in Colorado Springs. And Richie Hebner was a legendary Pirate player who was the hitting coach, but he had taken over as the manager because our manager got yanked up mid-season to coach third base for the Pirates. So the Pirate organization was in turmoil, and they fired first and third base coaches and brought up 2 other coaches, which was one of them was my manager named Trent Jewett. And so Richie Hebner was managing the club, and it was a little more loose atmosphere. You never knew what you were going to get with him because he was kind of he was just a guy who didn't really play by the rule all the time. He kind of did his own thing a little bit. So he calls me in the office and said, "I got good news and bad news. Which one you want first?" And I thought, what is going on? I'm pitching today. And I said, I'll take the bad news. And he said, bad news is you're not pitching today against Colorado. And he said, but the good news is you're going to pitch against the Braves on Wednesday, the big leagues. And, it was a bit, even though I knew I was going to get called to the big leagues at some point, probably in that season, it was still kind of like that reality moment that it was like being drafted in a way when you finally get that phone call and they say, oh, it's Pittsburgh Pirates and we took you in the 3rd round, the 69th pick. It was kind of along those lines, but even more special because you knew you had finally gotten to the place you wanted to be. But really quickly, I realized that, you realize it was going to be harder to stay than it was to just get there. But my first day in the big leagues was pretty special. I get called up and it was a rain delay. I went the next day. I show up at Three River Stadium. I have a suit on. I didn't know that home games you didn't need to wear a suit. So I was wearing a suit, and all the guys were ragging on me as soon as I walked in the door. And back in those days, the locker room was not that friendly. There was if you were 23 years old and you had not played in the major leagues, like you were going to know that you were the bottom guy on the totem pole. And so I walked in that locker room, and we had a pitching meeting that day. And we were talking about the game and stuff, and I was just hoping to relax. And I was putting on my spikes. And a teammate of mine, Jimmy Anderson, who we had played with a long time, he said, "What are you putting on spikes for?" And I said, "Oh, I've been pinch hitting and pinch running in AAA a lot." He said, "Man, nobody's pinch hitting here in the big leagues, bud. Put on your tennis shoes." So I did. So I put on my tennis shoes. I get out to Three River Stadium. I'm looking across the field. I see Greg Maddux. I see John Smoltz. I see Tommy Glavine. This is like, whoa, dude. These are the guys that I've had posters on my wall of. This is amazing. And I'm sitting there in the third inning in Three River Stadium. I get Arroyo in the on-deck circle. And I said, "I've got tennis shoes on." And they said, "Don't worry about it. It's a good box in there," meaning that the dirt in the box was good. They said, "Just go hit." I wound up making my major league debut in the third inning of the first game, sitting there against Bruce Chen. And I was the first pitcher to do that in 70 years. And so that was my debut, and it took a little bit of pressure off me. So the next night I got to make that first start.
That's pretty cool. I know you can't see the comments and stuff over here, but Danny Prater said, "Thanks for coming on, Bronson." Kevin Gray, the Beechwood coach. "Thanks, Bronson." Deanna Duff, my favorite pitcher. David Logan, he wants us to talk about how to get one of your CDs, and we'll do that later here. Brandon Walker, "Bronson, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. I'll never forget meeting you in 2017. Kevin Gray was wanting to know the first time you were a closer. Do you remember? Is that what you was talking about there? The first time you was a closer?
No, I never was a closer. I pitched out of the bullpen some with the Pirates a little bit. And then I pitched out of the bullpen in the playoffs with the Red Sox in 2003 and in 2004. But I was never a closer, but I was a guy who was setting up sometimes in the seventh and the eighth inning if there would be like a righty-righty matchup. If I had to come and get A-Rod, Gary Sheffield, and Derek Jeter out because they were all right-handed guys, I'd come in with a lot of breaking balls and try to get those 3 outs. But I never was a closer. I was never a hard thrower, and I was always going to be probably a starter. But at the time, I was young, and the organizations that I were in, they felt that I wasn't one of the top 5 guys, so they would put you down in the bullpen as a quote-unquote swing man who would be used as a long man if the starter got in trouble, but also could probably get some outs late in the ball game if needed.
Okay, Kevin Gray, he was on last night. I interviewed him, and he's saying that you're the closer tonight because he was the starter last night.
Oh, that makes more sense.
There you go. But I'm friends with Charlie Frank. I don't know how well you know Charlie Frank of the Reds Community Fund down in Cincinnati, and he was telling me a story about a little bit about you when growing up. With your dad, you had some routines and stuff with your dad that he said was pretty neat. You don't care to talk about that?
Yeah. I grew up very, very, very strange. A lot of people don't know a lot of the stories. I think in 2012, ESPN asked me if I had any photos of this stuff, and I said I've got a couple of videos. And so they played some of the videos during the game when I was pitching, I think against the Cardinals. But my father was I grew up down in Key West, Florida, and my father had a group of friends who were all lifting heavy weight at the time. Squat, bench, and deadlift is what they called the powerlifting movements. So they were powerlifting. This is the 70s, and it was just a popular thing to do. These guys were all benching 400 to 500 pounds. They were squatting in the mid 600s. And so I was a 5-year-old kid, and I asked to play baseball. My father said, "Are you sure you want to play baseball?" My father wasn't a baseball guy. And so I said, "Yeah." Well, as soon as he realized that I could backhand the ball and throw it across the infield like a 12-year-old without ever picking up a glove, he thought a light bulb went off in his head and said, if I put him in the weight room and make him a little bit stronger, I think there's at least a chance we can get a free education, right? We might be able to get a college scholarship here. So we started this thing. My father was already dedicated to the craft of being in the weight room. And so he then imparted that upon me. We were taking supplements, we were carbo loading, we were resting 2 days before I was pitching. This is at age 7 years old. By the time I'm an 8-year-old kid, the DVDs that I do have, I weigh under 60 pounds. I'm like 57 pounds. I squat 235 pounds. I deadlift 255 and bench 130. I mean, I'm like a little tiny skinny kid, but we were doing these things on a daily basis like a professional athlete. And it wasn't odd for me because I was just used to it. But looking back at some of the videos, I've showed some of those videos to guys like Gabe Kapler, some of the strongest guys in Major League Baseball, and their jaws just hit the ground because, it's hard for me to imagine how a kid weighing 55 pounds could push 255 pounds on his back. But it was just the way that he trained me. And what it really did was set a foundation for me to understand that baseball was an everyday game. And so that's why later in my career, people would say, how in the world are you throwing 200 innings year after year after year and you're never hurt? Part of that was what we did in the weight room all those years when I was a kid. And so that was kind of built in to who I was as a player, but people couldn't see that from the outside. They saw a happy-go-lucky guy. They didn't understand totally where I was coming from until much later when they realized, you threw 2,000 innings in 10 years. Like, how does a skinny guy do that? It was there. The guts of that were underneath from those early years in the 80s.
That's pretty cool. And also, I'm friends with Tom Browning. We call him Mr. Perfect. But you also threw a perfect game in AAA, didn't you?
I did. I just listened before I got on here with you. I just listened to the 9th inning of that game for the first time since I threw that perfect game.
Oh, you're kidding.
They're closing down Pawtucket where I threw that perfect game. It was the 4th perfect game in 130 years or something like that in that league. And they're shutting that stadium down this year. And so they're doing some piece on it. And I found the old tape and I sent it to them. And they sent me back the 9th inning digitally. And so I just listened to it. And my old friend Andy Abad, who also played in the big leagues with the Cincinnati Reds for a minute, was playing first base. And he caught the ground ball and flipped the last out to me. That was a special day.
That was pretty cool. I see Tony Nickel. He said, "Can you give a shout out to my son, Drew?" Hello, Drew. Also, I know you you have a leg kick. Where did you develop that at? And did that help you in your pitching style, or was it more to deceive the hitters?
It wasn't intentionally to deceive the hitters, although later in my career, guys would always joke. They'd be like, "Oh, man, they're like paying attention to your foot out here." And now they don't see the slow breaking ball coming. But it actually started around those years I was starting in the weight room. That was probably like 84 when I started in the weight room. And right around 85, 86, Dwight Gooden became a stud pitcher for the New York Mets. And my parents were Mets fans for some reason. We were living down in the Keys, and I guess my parents had never really watched baseball, and there was no baseball in Florida. So if you were a fan, you were probably a Braves fan back then. But for some reason, I think we had a satellite dish or something, and they just loved the Mets. And so I started watching Doc Gooden pitch, and he had this kind of high leg kick. And it was what my childhood mind kind of morphed out of watching Dwight Gooden. But what wound up happening was over the years, I realized that I was using my foot as a pendulum. So instead of picking my leg up with my hip flexor, right, which would make this tired if you did that all the time, I was using my foot to flick my leg up and it'd just be very relaxed. And so when you look at pictures of me and my foot's out by my head, for one, I don't know it's there. And two, it's much more relaxed than people would probably realize. And so it helped me be really fluid. It helped me use less energy. I felt like I needed all that stuff to get deep in ball games because, for me, the holy grail was to make it through the 7th inning every night. I really didn't care about strikeouts, and I really didn't care what the score of the game was, honestly, as long as we won. But I was trying to get deep in the ball game because I felt like that was the meat and potatoes of being a major league starter, was to do your job and to run 3/4 of that race so the bullpen didn't have to be tired every night.
Exactly. And getting back to your perfect game, I asked Tom Browning if his wife called him Mr. Perfect, and she said he was only perfect for an hour and 48 minutes. So does your wife or anything call you Mr. Perfect, or how does that go?
No, actually, the person I'm with now wasn't actually around. She was listening to that game with me today. She wouldn't have known that I threw that perfect game back then. We hadn't met yet. So I don't think anybody was at the game that day in 03 that I personally knew. Some of my old teammates from the Pirates were on that team. Adrian Brown was playing center field and made a great catch, who I'd been with for many years before that. And on the other side, coaching the Buffalo Bisons that day was a guy named Marty Brown, who was my old manager from 2 or 3 years in the minor leagues with the Pirates. So there was a little bit of connection there, but nobody in my life, my parents weren't at the game. My sister wasn't at the game. My at the time, girlfriend or wife was not at the game. Okay.
And you also had a kind of a memorable moment in the ALCS Game 6. And of course, Red Sox coming back from 3-0 deficit. The there was something that happened there that kind of stopped the game for a few minutes. I think A-Rod tried to shake your hand or something. What happened there?
Yeah, he was just being friendly. He was hoping to get an autograph. That's what it was. Yeah, yeah. It was that was a strange game. I mean, especially because if you go back to July 24th of that same year, I was also the guy who hit A-Rod, and that big fight broke out between him and Alex Rodriguez. And so I mean, between him and Jason Varitek, those guys went at it on the field, and so that was months earlier. But there was this whole thing brewing because from 2003 they had beat us in the playoffs last minute in extra innings with Aaron Boone's home run, and they had acquired Alex Rodriguez, who was trying to be a Red Sox prior to signing with the Yankees, but the union wouldn't allow him to drop money off his salary. So there was this whole kind of thing going on, and obviously people have had a certain opinion of Alex a lot in the way that he played the game, and sometimes it rubbed people the wrong way. And so there was a lot of animosity there. And then you put it on a big stage like that in New York City. And I was just trying to make an easy out, and it would have had Derek Jeter on second base with 2 outs, and I had to get Gary Sheffield out, which hopefully I would have. But him, doing that forced Derek all the way back to first base, which took a little bit of pressure off me because it gave me the opportunity to get out of that inning without having a guy in scoring position.
And how does that feel? How can you describe, winning the World Series in 2004 and breaking the curse from 1918? How do you put that in words?
I knew at the time that it was the greatest thing that was ever going to happen to me on a baseball field. I'm not on a personal level, just specifically for me, but as a collective team, I just knew there was no way to compare with that. I came from 8 years with the Pirates, and I get over to Boston, and at the time, I had only been in the one organization. So you just assume that every team kind of functions the same. And I was completely wrong. Every team has its own little culture in the way that they go about their business. And I didn't know anything really about. I knew 1986 was, a bad year for the Red Sox, and the ball had bounced between Bill Buckner's legs. But my parents were Mets fans, so we were cheering in the house, right? So I don't think of 1986 as a negative thing in my mind. And so I get to Boston, and I quickly realize that I'm dealing with a region of the world in New England that is so much more serious about their baseball team than they were in Pittsburgh. That it changed the way you thought about going to the ballpark. It felt like a playoff game every night. And so to play on that big stage and to be lucky enough, honestly, to be on that team, to just help out that ball club, to be pitching behind Pedro Martinez, Curt Schilling, Derek Lowe, and Tim Wakefield. I had a great career. All those guys still have more wins than me. It was a fantastic rotation. And, I got to be a part of the ride, and it was just amazing. We showed up the next day. It was raining and freezing cold, and 4 million people still came out to watch us on the duck boats. I felt like I was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off when the confetti's coming down and he's dancing in Chicago. It was, it was unmatched. There was no way to compare that to anything else. And when I came to Cincinnati, part of the reason I was so bummed when I got traded to Cincinnati was not that I had anything against Cincy, was the fact that I knew I was playing in a place where when I looked at people coming into the stadium off the street, when I was up in the weight room, I could see people walking in the stadium. They looked like they were coming to see the Beatles reunite. It was like a once-in-a-lifetime experience to go inside Fenway Park and inside this monastery and watch these Boston Red Sox play. And I didn't want to give that up.
The biggest thing here at Cincinnati is, of course, opening day. And, I try to go down every year for opening day, which we don't have to talk about that. But, that's when you come to Cincinnati and you have opening day, that's really a cool experience. But, you were on the pitching staff with Pedro Martinez, Curt Schilling. You played with David Ortiz. That's unbelievable. But getting good clubhouse stories that something happened back in those times?
Oh, wow. That clubhouse was a crazy one. Kevin Millar was the guy who literally stirred up the soup, right? It was like, you had a good core of guys personality wise, but they wouldn't have come to the forefront and they wouldn't have come out of their shell if it wasn't for Kevin. So Kevin Millar, he made Manny Ramirez, he made David Ortiz, he made guys like Johnny Damon, he made even guys like Varitek and Schilling come out of there. When we got Schilling in 2004, I remember in spring training, they said, don't talk to him the day he pitches. They were like, don't talk to him at all. He does that Randy Johnson thing. He's irritated all day and he doesn't want to communicate with anybody. So we left him alone for spring training. Well, really quickly, once the season started, Millar's over there just chirping, chirping, chirping all the time. So you're not going to shut him up. And so he would be just chirping at Kurt the day he pitched. And next thing you know, it must have been 3 weeks into the season. I look over and Kurt's playing spades. He's playing cards with guys the day he pitched. And, there was just no way to kind of like be, that stern or that, I don't know, that robotic inside that locker room, because it was just so many characters. Pedro Martinez on some days was very quiet, didn't speak, but he was a lunatic half the time. We had guys like Curtis Lascanic that people don't remember that much, but he was a lunatic himself. We just had a crazy locker room, and that's why, I had the cornrows because Manny was growing his dreads out, and Johnny Damon showed up looking like Jesus in spring training that year. And it was such a fun locker room to be in, because we also had all these shenanigans going on. But on the flip side of it, we went out on the field and everybody's really serious about playing the game. And it felt like, New England. It felt like a blue-collar team. We had Trot Nixon with a big Fu Manchu, and his head shaved. And there was nothing clean about it. So every time we would play the Yankees, you looked over at their side and they looked like a bunch of CEOs clean cut. And on our side, we looked like a bunch of guys that just got out of prison. And, it was fun to be on that team.
And, I think it's 2006 when you came to the Ridge, you made the All-Star game. How does that rank? I mean, I know the World Series 2004 was something special, but how was it also to be on the All-Star team?
Yeah, just from a strictly personal level, that was a huge check mark. I never sat down, and I don't think I ever sat down and purposely thought, what do you want to accomplish before you leave the game? Because you're going on it from a year to year, day-to-day basis sometimes. So you don't generally sit back and think exactly what do you want to accomplish in the game. I knew I wanted to be a frontline starter, but winning the Gold Glove in 2010 and being an All-Star in 06, both of those things now I feel very proud of those. Sometimes you get to play the game like Ken Griffey Jr. for a long time, and you either don't get to go to the playoffs at all, you never win a World Series ring. Sometimes you can be a really solid player and never make an All-Star team. So I felt fortunate to get off to a really good start that year, to also get some kind of national attention in a smaller town like Cincinnati, where people would have to just realize that I could win 15 games not only on a good team like the Red Sox, but I could do it on a bad team like the Reds at the time. And so it gave me a lot of street credibility for being a frontline starting pitcher who could, handle his own kind of in any environment.
And, you won the Gold Glove. You were a great hitter. You were all around player. What's your opinion on like a DH? I know you faced him over in the American League. National League, of course, don't do it unless they do it this year. But what's your opinion on having a DH?
I kind of like that the leagues were different. My very first big league camp in 1997, they were still 2 baseballs and 2 umpiring crews. So I can remember going over to pitch against the Texas Rangers for the first time and feeling the baseball and being like, whoa, this thing is different, because it was the American League ball. And they obviously went to 1 baseball and to 1 umpires crew at some point. But, there's pros and cons to the DH and not the DH, at least from a starting pitcher standpoint. I like the strategy of playing in the National League a little bit more. I did like being at the plate. I like to be able to have to put the bunts down. I like to run the bases. I like that you were going to have a little bit of a breathing room by having the 9th hitter or the 8th hitter be the pitcher. So you could kind of pitch around the 8-hole hitter or the 7-hole hitter and use that as strategy. I really enjoyed that. The best part of the DH was the fact that if you were pitching well, even if you were losing the game, you could stay in, right? You didn't have to be yanked out of games in the 6th inning because you were losing 3-1 and your at bat came up. So in the American League, when I was with Boston, it was just never a thought on your mind. As long as you were putting zeros up on the board, you knew you'd stay in the game. And I really enjoyed that as well. So, it's kind of it's 50-50. It's if I had to say, Bronson, you have to choose one and you'll have to stay in that league for your whole career, I would have chose the National League just because it was a little bit easier to pitch probably. And also I enjoyed some of those other things. I mean, hitting a home run, even if you only did it once, was a feeling you might not ever duplicate anywhere else in your life.
Exactly. And I know, I think on Fox Sports Ohio, you were talking one night about how pitchers go all out and don't really pitch anymore. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, it's not just these days. I think that was probably always an issue. People say, oh, people only care about velocity now that everybody's throwing so hard, but people have always only cared about velocity, right? I mean, when the average major league starter was throwing 90, everybody was trying to throw 90. Now that everybody's, can throw close to 100, they're all trying to throw 100. It's built in to, who we are as people is like, the bigger, the badder, the faster always, you think they win. And so it's hard to be a guy who goes out there and only throws 87, 88 miles an hour and that you're happy with it. But in order to be successful with the stuff you have to succumb to the realization that it just is what it is. It's like the size of your nose. It's not going to change, right? It's like, sometimes your velocity is just capped, and we are who we are as people, and you're going to have to find the best way that you can kind of manipulate those tools to be successful. And, there's always been more guys in a game who were just throwers than pitchers, right? Because physical dominance when we're kids works. But physical dominance when you get to the higher levels of playing professional sports doesn't work, because a guy like Manny Ramirez and a guy like Albert Pujols, they don't care if you're throwing 100 if they know it's coming and it's going to be in the middle of the plate, right? And so the guys who survive for a long time are guys who can think a little bit more and that have other options other than just power. Now, when you take a guy like my mind and you take my ability to manipulate different pitches and shapes, or to have a multitude of pitches that you can throw in any count, and you add that power, that's where you get the Pedro Martinez, the Max Scherzer, the Chris Sale, right? That's where you get the Hall of Fame type guy. And I was never going to be that guy. I took a limited skill set and I turned it into a really good Major League Baseball career that was a whole level, probably 2 levels below a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, and I know I used to love watching you pitch. We used to play, instead of wiffle ball, we played lemon, and you took the plastic lemon and you threw it like a wiffle ball, and it would break and dance and do different things. When you pitched, it reminded me a lot of that. I mean, you had the curveball, which was wicked, but you also changed speeds on it, and the curveball would go everywhere. And, man, just to watch that and watch you pitch, it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, the curveball definitely, kept me in the game as long as I was there. When I was young, I was always an average velocity guy. When I came out of high school, I was 85 to 88, and I would throw 90 on a really good day in high school, maybe once or twice. I was only weighing 150 pounds then, and a lot of people thought that I would grow into a bigger guy who would throw harder, but I never really did. In my prime, I'd say 2006 was probably my prime physically, as strong as I felt. I was 28 years old, I think, or 29, and I was probably throwing – even then I was throwing 88, 89 most of the time, but maybe there was days I'd throw 90, 91 if I really needed it. But I was never a hard thrower. My velocity was never going to scare guys. At the end of the day, I had to use that breaking ball. And what I found early on was that I had the ability to make shapes with pitches consistently, and I knew about where the ball would go, right? A lot of times we talk about how it is you're going to be successful with stuff, and this includes big league pitchers. I've had the conversation with a lot of guys who are in the middle of their career, but they have great stuff and their numbers don't reflect that. They're throwing 94 to 96 with the best breaking ball and the best split finger in the game, but they still have a 5 ERA every year. And you're trying to dissect those guys. And a lot of times what you find is that they didn't know what shape their ball would be in and about where it would be. I talk about it in terms of like paintball, right? If we're playing paintball and my gun is always shooting a little bit of a curve to the left, I can still hit some people like that because I can just make the adjustment and play for the curve. But if it goes left once and then goes right another time, then you're just dead in the water, right? You don't have any idea what's going on. It's going to be almost impossible to hit anybody. So your stuff doesn't have to be dynamic to get outs, but you have to know about what shape it will be and about where it will finish. And I always had an idea of how to do that with my breaking ball, and it really kept me alive.
Yeah, and you were always fun to watch. Kevin Gray was asking there something about, it kind of went up through, there's a lot of people commenting, but he mentioned who was the toughest person you faced as a batter in MLB?
On a consistent level, I would say the 2 guys that would stand out above all would be Albert Pujols and Barry Bonds. I didn't face Barry that many times. I probably faced him 10 times in my whole career, and I was younger then. So I always say Albert because he was in my division. I had to face him year in and year out, multiple times a year. And he just, like I was talking about with power and strategy and the ability to command a baseball, On the flip side of that, if you could hit 300 with power and you have plate discipline to not swing at junk, that's where you get the Hall of Fame batter. And Albert was as good as they come for those 10 years that I had to face him. He was as strong as anybody in the park. He could hit the ball out of the park anywhere. He wasn't going to strike out, and he didn't chase bad pitches. And so you literally would get on the mound and just hope he hit it at somebody. It was like, I know he's going to hit an absolute rocket. He's going to square the ball up. I just hope it's a line drive at the short, because it was just so tough to get him out. There was a time, probably a year, where I felt like I got kind of lucky with Albert. I started throwing him inside changeups, which is just a very odd pitch for a righty-righty matchup, especially with a power guy. But I was throwing him inside changeups, and he'd either hit a home run foul or he'd ground it to third base. And it helped me get him out there for a while. But you could only get a good hitter out like that so many times.
I think Timmy Muse was asking, but defensively, who did you like behind you? I guess like second and short. Who are your favorite guys to be behind you playing those positions?
Playing shortstop. Yeah, there's been so many guys in my career, I think, that were back there. The one that stood out a lot was Pokey Reese. Pokey was a guy who he was really light on his feet, right? There's some guys that are really fast, like a Billy Hamilton, but Pokey was laterally really light on his feet, and he had the ability to make plays in the hole and get to balls that other guys weren't getting to and make it look really easy. He had a knack for getting the jump on the ball, and so when Pokey was around in Boston in those years, it was really nice because you just felt like on that side of the ball there was really no way that you could get any better. I think, also having Brandon I really enjoyed Brandon being out there, even though Brandon didn't turn a double play that good because he really didn't like getting hit too much. And there was times when he was so flashy that he'd drive you crazy because you didn't get, something done. But for the most part, he played hurt. He played tough. He always gave you a good at bat. He played good, solid defense, and he made a lot of plays that other guys wouldn't be able to make. I enjoyed my time with Brandon all 9 years of him playing on this team with me.
Michael Bob says, this is one smart dude with great communication skills, talking about you, not me. He said, thanks, Bronson, for helping out the foundation. Always liked you as a player, but now even more respect for doing this. So I thought throw that out to Michael Bob. He's one who introduced us to playing lemon instead of wiffle ball also. And William Warfield, he wanted to know, is it true that you rode a bicycle every day to home games in Cincinnati?
No, not every day. I did ride sometimes. I'm trying to think of who it was. I think it wasn't Devin Mesoraco. It was, I'm going to get it wrong. I can't remember if it was Cozart or Mesoraco or Todd Frazier. I think it might have been, I'm not sure, but somebody had an electric bike. I came home off a road trip and somebody had an electric bike. And I said, what is that? And they said, oh, it's an electric bike. And I'd never heard of one before. So I ordered a couple from California. And so there was a time when I would ride my bike to the stadium a lot because it was an electric bike. And I was going downhill from Mount Adams the whole way. And then I could go home uphill. And it was really cool to kind of like cut through the back roads and find your way up to Mount Adams. So I did that quite a few times. But there was also a lot of times when, I didn't do a whole lot. And people ask like if I played golf when I pitched and stuff. And I didn't do a whole lot except play baseball. I don't know if you watched The Last Dance and the documentary with Jordan, and a lot of times you see him just hanging out in the hotel room, and that's just what you do if you play sports at a high level, right? You have to hang a lot because you're conserving your energy for the workouts you got to do at the stadium. You've got to be on top of your game. I only got to pitch 32 to 34 times a year, and if there was a time that you did something off the field that compromised how strong you felt on the mound, especially for a guy who was thin like myself, it just you couldn't live with it. And so there was a lot of times when I just wouldn't ride my bike to the park just because you wanted to conserve energy and you wanted to get in a little bit smoother, maybe without seeing people or having who knows, you could wipe out once in a while. But there were definitely days when I wanted to take a nice ride and had a good time with it.
Cameron Plank, he says, what a cool dude. Cameron, he signed with the New York Mets and played a little bit minor league there. But also, my uncle asked me this the other day. He wanted to know, did you hurt your back carrying Chris Welch in all those JTM commercials?
That's funny. I got a guitar sitting here right here, and every time I hear this E minor, it goes, "Peace is alone." And it's like if I just hear an E minor backwards, it makes me think of that song. So,
Together again.
Yeah, those commercials were, I didn't watch most of them at all after we filmed those. There's two funny stories about that. One is the day we went to film that during, I think it was during the off season. I show up to the stadium. They've got the whole crew up top. They're doing this whole big thing, and they, I wanted to get something to eat really quick, so I went to get some cereal, some Cheerios, and it was sitting in a glass bowl. They had just gotten these glass bowls inside the stadium, and the Cheerios have been sitting there for a couple of months, so they were stuck to the bottom. And when I went to pour it out, nothing came out. And I just tapped the top of it, and the whole thing exploded like a bomb and cut my hand so bad through the left thumb here that there was just blood everywhere. And I had to go to Kremchek's office, and he had to sew me up. He had to put me to sleep. He gave me an arm block and all this stuff. And I wanted to just go back and film the commercial. And he told me that I could. And then when I woke up, my arm was paralyzed for the rest of the day. And I said, I thought you were going to let me do the commercial. And he said, well, I just had to do it. I didn't want to tell you, but I had to give you this arm block. So we didn't get to film until during spring training. So actually me and Chris, we had to fly up from Sarasota and do it during spring training on an off day. But those commercials were really fun to do. We knew they were going to be, cheesy. And, I never watched them until 2017. And I remember being on the plane, and I said, Chris, have you ever watched the JTM commercials? And he said, yeah, all the time. And I said, dude, they are hilarious. And to this day, one of the most things I've ever heard in the bullpen for the rest of my career was, we're together again. There was always somebody yelling that at me, no matter where we played.
Exactly. And, I showed you a few pictures there earlier in 2017 on your retirement day, kicking it with Bronson. Of course, David Irie Day down there too. And we was out on the field, and I'll see if I can put this one picture on. I hate to hide your face here, but this picture here is one of the most famous ones I've got. We have this one on everything we do at the foundation. So if you ever go to the website, you're bigger than I am on there. So that's something you'll see a lot on the website. And, we've got a few more pictures here when you retired down there. But here's one here with, which I love this one, if I can get it to come up here. This is when, of course, there you are, and it says, for all life's curveballs. And I love that because that's what I've known you best for, is your curveballs and all your breaking pitches. But, we was walking out to home plate, and I'll show you this picture. I was kind of lagging behind a little bit, and you kept looking around at me like, hurry up. But I kind of felt bad because this was your day. You pitched 17 years or so in Major League Baseball. It's like, I don't want to get in front of him, so I was kind of lagging back. But you were real nice to me, and I appreciate, you being there. And I'm glad I got to share a day with you, and it was really fun. And, like I said, I appreciate everything you do for us, and it was a good time down there.
Yeah, that was a fantastic day. I mean, that was mostly due to Phil Castellini. He had this idea that he wanted to let me play a music show on second base, in the stadium on a stage. And, it was an idea that I was already hurt. I wasn't going to pitch for the rest of the season. And so it was, he came to me with the idea, and I thought it was fantastic. I was going to get back together with the guys in the band that I hadn't really played much with in Cincinnati for the last few years. And they gave me a send-off that you normally see for a guy like, David Ortiz or Derek Jeter, guys who have had just, Hall of Fame careers. And I've had a Reds Hall of Fame career, but I didn't have a true Hall of Fame career. And it was a bit of a surprise to have so many guys on the Jumbotron talking to me that day. I don't know if you got to see some of that, but
yeah,
Epstein and Johnny Cueto. I mean, it was hard not to tear up out there, honestly. I mean, it was really a moving day. You're a 5 and 6 year old kid, and you're throwing a tennis ball against a wall, and you're dreaming of pitching in a World Series or playing shortstop like Ozzie Smith and being on a team and turning double plays and stuff. And, you never think it's going to end, for one. And two, when you get as deep in the game as I had been, you realize that guys rarely ever get to walk away from the game on a good note. They almost always exclusively get pushed out of the game when they still want to play much longer. And, I felt like I got to walk away on my own terms and to do it in a city that I really loved being in, where I had the meat and potatoes of my career. I didn't bounce around to too many teams. I got to be here for almost a decade. And it just made it, it made it where it feels like home. It felt like home. It gives me the opportunity to go down to the ballpark and still show up and talk trash to all the guys in the clubhouse and eat their food and clean the shoes and pass out laundry and see the clubhouse guys and, see the Stowe family. All that stuff has been fantastic. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't come over to Cincinnati.
Yeah. And, it's been a, great ride. I know, of course, when you've been down here and how long you've been playing over the years and stuff down here. And, we sure enjoyed, all the games and stuff you played down here, and appreciate, of course, you being on here tonight. Also, would you care to talk a little bit about your music? Because I know you play music, and I don't know, somebody was asking me if you had an album out and where to get your album. How can they get a hold of that? But would you care to a little bit talk about that? And also Eddie Vedder. Of course, you're friends with Eddie Vedder, so would you kind of like to talk about that relationship a little bit?
Yeah. Well, the music came in. Everybody in my family was a musician, but I didn't play anything. Growing up, my father was always singing around the house. He was in bands. My mother was playing the piano and the violin, and my sister as well. I never picked up anything, but I guess maybe it was going into my head without knowing it. And so when I was 22, I was in AA with the Pirates, and somebody gave me an acoustic guitar. It was actually the assistant general manager of the club. And it was the first time I tried to sing, really, and I just wanted to play songs that I had been listening to on the radio since I was in high school, which was Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and Oasis. And so it just started this thing where I started carrying a guitar with me every day, wherever we would go, whether it was on the road or at home. I'd always have it with me. It was the only thing that really spoke to me other than the game of baseball. It was something that I didn't want to put down. It wasn't something like golf that I was just going to do on occasion. It felt like the guitar was calling my name every day. You need to pick me up, play this thing. And what I realized over a long period of time was actually not playing the guitar, but the singing part of it was very therapeutic. Whether I had a good game or a bad game, or it was anxiety or it was adrenaline, whatever was going on, it just felt it felt good to get the angst and the anxiety off your chest and singing at the top of your lungs of these old grunge songs from the 90s. And so it was just me wanting to play around the campfire at first. And then I played, I went to an event in Boston called the Hot Stove Cool Music that Peter Gammons and Theo Epstein put on every year for charity. And I jumped up on stage and played Black by Pearl Jam. And because Boston was such a town that was on their players, the media wrote a lot about it, which then landed me doing a record called Covering the Bases, which was a cover album of 90 songs that I loved. And that was back in 2005. We put that out just before I got traded to the Reds. And so that really was the inception of me playing on a little bit more of a serious level and not just playing around my house and starting to play shows. And then that slowly progressed to where Warner Brothers asked me if I wanted to continue playing music. They put a band together for me here in Cincinnati. And that's how I met the guys that I'm in the band now, in the Bronson Arroyo band. And so that band, we play around town anywhere. We go to New England sometimes in the summer, but we play a lot of times within 3-4 hours of Cincinnati, whether it's a kid's baseball camp or it's charity or just playing at Bogart's, whatever it is, and that's just fun to play stuff from Tom Petty and the Beatles and all the stuff you really loved as a kid, to get up on stage and play. Now I started writing an original record for the first time about a year and a half ago, and I'm probably 70% finished with it. It should be finished if it wasn't for the pandemic. I was supposed to go out to LA and finish it. And that's a different group of guys that I had met when I played with the Red Sox. And those guys are all musicians in big bands, like Miley Cyrus's band and American Hi-Fi and, Gnarls Barkley and Matchbox 20. These guys all play in these bands, and they're kind of like traveling musicians, hired guns to play. But we had been friends for the last 15 years, and we always said we were going to make an original record. And so I'm doing that. And so I wrote most of these songs with those guys or by myself, with Elliot Sloan from Blessed Union of Souls, who lives here in Cincinnati, and another kid named Chris Lambert. And so I'm just having a good time trying to create music, and it's been fun. I don't know if anything will come of it. I will have an album out at some point, but I don't have a name of that band, and we don't have any album art or anything yet. We're gonna wait and finish the product and see what happens with it. But music has been a great outlet for me, and it's part of my life every day now. And it's just it's something that I'm never going to put down. I can't play baseball forever, but I can strum the guitar when I'm 85, I think, and hum a tune at least.
And you're friends also with Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam, and I know, you different performers. I think you had different ones down there on Cincinnati, taking a little batting practice one day. So, I mean, you're in the clique.
Yeah, I've gotten to meet some guys that otherwise I would never have met. Yeah, I mean, Eddie, the guy I brought the guys from the Red Hot Chili Peppers down to take batting practice. I've known the guys from Stained. I've played on stage with like the Counting Crows, and I can't even think of all of them. But over the years, a lot of musicians love Creed. Guys from Creed we used to be friends with. They all would come around to the ballpark if they enjoyed baseball, and you get to click a little bit. And if they like sports and you like music, sometimes you have this banter back and forth. But Eddie Vedder has been the guy who was kind of my Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith was my favorite player growing up, and Eddie. When I heard the 10 record when I was a freshman in high school in '92, there was something so special about it, and it never left me. And that record I listened to almost every day in the weight room when I worked out, almost my entire career. It was something. It's a driving force. The songs are really vicious. They've got some bad stories in there, but he puts them down in such a beautiful way, and the music is so good that I just couldn't let it go. And over the years, I met Eddie, and it was a real slow turn, but we became friends, and we played on stage a few times, and he's invited me up to play with Pearl Jam, and I played with him at solo shows. And when a guy calls you out of the crowd, who's been a childhood hero, and whispers in your ear, "Do you know how to play Black?" And it's my favorite song of all time. And you go up there unannounced, no preparation, and it's just me and him, and I'm playing an acoustic guitar, and he's singing this thing in front of 5,000 people in a small theater in Orlando. It doesn't get much better than that, That's something that, I mean, almost in a lot of ways, in my mind, it's more of a dream than winning a World Series, because I wasn't preparing for the music thing as long as I was in baseball.
Exactly. You kind of remind me of your voice with Creed. I've been listening to you, and you kind of remind me of Creed. But anyway, Mike Long was wanting to know, are you a Brooksville native, Florida native? And any comments on the high school experience you had at the time as far as opponents or teammates who may have also made it to the majors, a great area for baseball?
Yeah, so my parents moved from the Keys when I was 10 up to Brooksville, and by pure chance, we had a bunch of people move into town around the same time. A lot of them came from down around Hollywood, Miami area, and a few of them were already in the Brooksville area, and some other guys came from other places. But you had myself. We almost had 5 guys playing the major leagues from the same little tiny. This is pre-travel ball, and this is just put on your little your Dairy Queen uniform and go down there and play on Saturdays, and you get your 12 games in, and that's it. And from that same league, it was myself and A.J. Brzezinski, both had 15-year careers. And we had 3 other guys, a guy named Bert Snow, Landon Hessler, and Brent Stentz. All 3 of those guys were knocking on the door playing in the big leagues. They either played AAA ball or, they played a really high level of baseball in college. And, it was just a unique time when somehow we all got collectively together, and it really raised the bar for everybody there in Brooksville. And so, but there was a lot of other guys around the area, in the Tampa area, that a lot of them got drafted. I can't even name a bunch, a ton of the guys didn't make it to the major leagues, but there's still, guys that came out of Tampa Jesuit that played, like Jason Michaels played for the Phillies and played, quite a few years in the major leagues. It's a hotbed of sports because there's warm weather there all the time. And that was really why my father kind of moved up a little bit, because he wanted me to be not so isolated to a 3x5 island in Key West, and he wanted to expose me to some better talent, and he thought it would be a good move. And I still call Brooksville home, and I'm in there riding my electric bike around town all the time.
That's pretty cool. And Johnny Everman, he said he watched Bronson hit a home run against the Giants in 2007 when Bonds was chasing Aaron. So, he was talking about that. Also, your music, work. Do you have a website or anything where somebody can go to see where you're going to play at, or keep up with your schedule or anything?
Yeah, if you just go to the Facebook page, if you go to the Bronson Arroyo Band Facebook page, obviously everything for the year got almost squashed at this point because there's no music shows being played. But we usually try to keep up pretty good with where we're going to be playing. Sometimes we're playing a bunch. Sometimes we go long periods of time we don't play. The original stuff, I don't have a platform for it as of now, but I'm sure I'll integrate it with the Facebook page at some point, and it'll probably find its own little pocket if we do anything with that record. But the Bronson Arroyo Facebook page, you can usually find where we're playing around town.
Okay, and I'll probably be in touch with you. I know we do. We've got a cabin down here that overlooks the Ohio River, and we do fundraiser shows, which is mostly bluegrass. We've never had Creed version of Bronson Arroyo up there, but I will be in touch with you and see what we can work out about getting you down here in Lewis County, which is about an hour and a half drive from Cincinnati. So that's something I'd like to work with you on, and we'll talk about that. I'll talk to the guy I was talking to earlier, and hopefully, hey, we might be able to get you down here in Lewis County.
All right. All right.
Okay, we're going to end it up here with some quick questions. And these are questions that different people ask me, and it's just like some of the things that people may not know about you. But what was your first car?
My first car was a Chevy Corsica, light blue.
There you go. And somebody wanted to know if you ever heard of bluegrass music.
Absolutely. I play a little ukulele, but I don't play the banjo, but I wish I did.
There you go. Because my uncle just asked a while ago if you could play Rocky Top, and but anyway, Travis Sam says God's country. Travis is Nicholas County coach. He's been on here tonight. Hello, Travis. And favorite Red Sox teammate.
My favorite Red Sox teammate was Kevin Millar. He was the pizzazz in the locker room. He made everybody feel comfortable, and he was also fair to everybody in there. That's what I loved about him. I'd say the two guys riding probably just behind him would have been Red Sox would have been him, but Reds would have been David Ross and Ryan Hannigan, the two guys that were probably my favorite catchers of all time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Reds, your favorite player. So also, and I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, why the number 61?
Yeah, that was just a number. If you ever see a high number, it's just a number that a young kid gets stuck with in his first major league camp. And sometimes, if you want to, you can change your number. And I could have probably gotten 22 or something that looked a little sexier. But I jokingly got 61 and had a good second half of the season with the Red Sox out of the bullpen. I made the playoff roster when I had no business being on that team in 2003. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to make 61 household numbers. It's odd. It's strange. But once you write it enough times with your autograph, you just write 61, you don't feel like changing. So I figured I'd leave it. And, now it feels like home. Other than the fact that for all those years playing with Joey Votto being number 19, they would mix up my laundry a lot on the road. And I'd find his socks hanging in my locker because they had flipped it upside down.
Oh, my goodness. But, yeah, we appreciate you being on here tonight. Like I said, I'll be in touch. I really do appreciate you coming on here and talking to us. And, we try to get the word out and do a lot with baseball. We do a lot with the Cincinnati Reds. And it was just special to me to be on the field with you on your retirement day. And thanks. I really do appreciate you coming on, Bronson. And, like I said, we'll be in touch. And thanks for everything that you do.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bronson.